So hope I'm audible. Good afternoon. So in a previous class, you would have just revisited the topic related to functions. Okay, so what and all we have not discussed the basics of functions. Those stuff would have been covered in your yesterday's class. So we will move on with today's session. Today's session is one of the interesting topic that everyone needs to know related to any programming language. Okay, so the topic that we're going to discuss in today's class is about exceptions. Okay, so I'll share my presentation. Okay, so this is day 13th under module 1. So we are going to discuss the topic called as errors, exceptions, and how to handle errors and exceptions. This is what we're going to discuss in today's class. So this term error, when we start to discuss about this term called as error, so error is not a new word that you people are coming across because you're working in different disciplines, so you know what actually an error means. Okay, so from the perspective of computers, we generally term error as a bug. Okay, if something goes wrong, okay, then we generally term that as an error. So when do I feel about something is going wrong is the change that happens in each and every domain. So there are errors that will occur in all the disciplines that we work. Okay, but how we define our error, okay, completely depends upon that specific domain. Okay, so when we speak with respect to computers, okay, that too, especially with respect to programming languages, actually we people are learning a programming language. So from the perspective of programming language, we should know what actually an error means. Okay, so when we write a code, okay, we actually stick on with the structures, okay, of a particular language. So we have learned so many structures previously. So to just list out, we learned about if else statements. Okay, that is under decision making. Okay, under we call that topic as selection. We learned something called as looping, for loop. Okay, so for loop, while loop, your if else, your functions, everything can be termed as the constructs of a specific language. Okay, we learned about different data types, we learned about variables. Okay, so when we learned about each and every structure, or we can say it as a feature of a particular programming language, we also learned this is how we have to write an if loop. So for example, if I write if else in Python, I have to put an if, then I have to specify a condition, then I have to keep a semicolon, and then the block of statements that is present within the if will get in. And if there is an else part with respect to that if, I have to put an else. Okay, so one sec. Whenever I take any particular feature or a construct of a particular language, I have to follow some rules. So these rules are generally termed as syntax. Okay, we call them as, for example, if I write an if condition, I have to write if is a keyword. I have to mention the condition, then I have to keep a semicolon, and then I need to follow proper indentation over here. Okay, so all these are called as the structure of programming language. So the general structure of a programming language can be termed as its syntax. Okay, so what is the term that we use over here is syntax. Okay, so this is called as syntax. If you take any control structure or any feature of a programming language, that particular feature and control structure will be having its own format of writing it. So that its own format of writing is generally termed as syntax. One sec. Okay, so how we can define an error is errors are the things that are present in the statement of a code, which is actually makes the statement syntactically incorrect. Okay, so what is, how do you define an error is, error is a part of your statement, okay, which is in your code, And if that statement is going to be syntactically incorrect, then that will be deducted as an error. Okay, so Python has its own parser. Okay, so let us not deep dive into this concept called as parser. So this is just a programming language which basically will look at whether it is syntactically right or not. Hope I am clear. If I have a code, I will be having a collection of statements in my code. Okay, so each and every statement, is it syntactically correct or not, is the process that is being done by a parser. Okay, so if the statement is not syntactically correct, then the parser will detect that as an error. Okay, so for example, if you I'll show you a very simple example with respect to Python. One sec. I'll move to shell. So here if you see, one sec, control L, I'll close it and I'll open it. Okay, here it is. I'll open it again. Okay, so I'll show you a very simple example. For example, I'm putting a statement called as print. Okay, print of, I'm going to show you a division. uh, 1 divided by 1. Okay, so how do you say this statement is syntactically incorrect? If a print statement is present, okay, so if I put print of 1 comma 1, this is syntactically right. Why? How do I say it is syntactically right? Print is actually a function. Okay, so we have opened a round bracket. Then we have mentioned an argument for this print function, which is actually a division 1 divided by 1, and then I am closing it. Okay, so syntactically this statement is correct because you have invoked the print function by passing one argument. That's it. You have invoked the print function by passing one argument. So when you invoke, you have to open the braces and you have to close the braces. For example, if I'm writing the same statement like this, 1 divided by 1. Now here if you see, I opened only one round bracket, but I have closed, okay, two round brackets. So what was the error that is being stated over here? Syntax error. Okay, this is a syntax error because there is an unmatch of brackets. Okay, if you close a bracket, then obviously this that closed bracket requires an open bracket for it. So that open bracket is not present, then the Python parser will reply that this is a syntax error. So I can term this as an error in Python. So whatever is being considered as the syntax error in a code, that will be termed as an error in Python. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So now I will move on with the concept of exceptions. What is actually termed as exceptions? So in today's class, we will be discussing about two topics. We have to understand what is an error, and then following error, we have to understand what is exception. Okay, so I have defined what is an error. Error is actually a statement which is syntactically incorrect. If a statement in a code is syntactically incorrect, then the Python parser will detect that as an error and it will reply you back, this is the error. Okay, so this is called as error. Clear? So we will move on with what is actually an exception means. So now let's try an example over it. So let me try to put print of 0 divided by 0. So what I will get as output over here. So I'm trying to put print of. So according to you, I know this statement is syntactically correct. Yes or no? This statement is syntactically correct. Print, I opened round brackets, 0 divided by 0, a division is taking place. I'm closing the round bracket. So obviously, when I look into this statement is syntactically correct. But still, okay, what happens when I try to execute this code? I have been thrown with an error. Okay, so what is that error? Division by 0. So they have your Python parser has detected this process and it has stated something else as zero division error, division by zero. So we all know in mathematics you cannot divide any numerator with a denominator called as zero. You don't have a resultant value for it. Okay, so if you that's the meaning of it. If you divide anything by zero, the resultant value is infinity. So we are not going to represent any, we don't have a separate character to represent this infinity and all. So when you try to divide any number by zero, it is meaningless over here. So what your Python is actually doing over here is it is telling you that this is not a syntax error. When I look into this statement, there is no error with respect to its syntax. Okay, syntax is pakka, but still this has to be termed as an error, because what I am trying to do over here, I am dividing a 0 by 0, or if I put divide any number by 0, it actually means it is syntactically correct, but there is no meaning in this statement. So such stuffs will be taken into account. Okay, I'm just giving you one example in this form. If I try to give you another example, let me consider in this way. I have 10 items in my list. Okay, so let us take an example over here. So I'm having 10 items in my list. I'll put it as 5 over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So how how these elements will be indexed? This is a list. So how do you perform your indexing? I want answers. How do you index the elements? Okay, you will start with 0. So starting with 0 implies fine. 1 will take an index value 0, 2 will take an index value 1, 3 will take an index value 2, 4 will take an index value 3, and element 5 will take an index value 4. So if I consider this as a list with a name A, okay, can I uh, can I perform manipulation over each and every element? If I want to access each and every element separately, what I can do? How do I access each and every element separately? I'm throwing you a question, you can answer. My question is very simple. That's it. If I want to access 1, I have to put A of 0. Okay. Now, if I am putting A of 5, do I have an element or do I have a place called as A of 5 in my list? No, we don't have an A of 5 for this particular list. So this is called as index error. Okay, we call it as index error, but actually in Python or in any other language, okay, this kind of errors which are syntactically right. A of 5 is syntactically right. If I want to access an element, okay, if I want to access an element, I will put as A of I only. Okay, so now in the statement munnadi, I have a statement like this for I in, okay, I'm putting range of 0 comma 6. So if I put range of 6, I will take what values? 0 comma 6, I will take value 0. Okay, you people all know what's the meaning of range function. So 0 implies starting index. Okay, 6 implies 6. Before 5 till 5 you can track. So I will take a value 0 first, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5 also it will take. But according to my case, okay, according to our case, we don't have any element A of 5. So when I put A of 5, A of I, okay, when I put A of I, this is syntactically correct, but still an error is thrown, and that error is called as index error. Okay, so how we actually define an error? If a statement is syntactically incorrect, we will call that as an error. Okay, understand? If a statement contains syntax, okay, incorrect, then that is being termed as error in Python. But if a statement is syntactically correct, but still we end up with an error, okay, still if we end up with an error, we need a different name for that. So that different name is called as exceptions. Am I clear? So I can also have for example, if I'm assigning a is equal to, okay, I'm assigning a is equal to capital A. So this is a string. So if I try to convert this into an integer, okay, what is the function I will use? I will use int of a. So is it possible for me to convert this into int of a? No, it will not allow. It will say this literal a cannot be converted into string with base 10. That will be your answer. Okay, because you are having, if I have an integer within a string, this conversion is possible. Otherwise, this conversion is not possible. So these are exceptions. You know what's the actual meaning of exceptions in English? Okay, something which is stand out of the original scenario, okay, out of box. Okay, so this is not fitting into the concept of error. Syntactically things are right, okay, syntactically things are right, but still it is bringing some sort of errors into your coding. So such kind of errors, okay, though it's syntactically correct, such kind of errors will be termed as exceptions. Okay, so this is called as an exception. So how do you define an exception? Is exception is a type of an error raised when a Python code is syntactically correct, still the code ends in an error. Okay, so what is an exception? The Python code will be syntactically correct, but still the code will end with an error. Such errors are termed as exceptions. Okay, clear? The errors which are being thrown when the Python code is syntactically correct, such errors are termed as exception. So the best example I showed you, print 0 divided by 0. You cannot divide anything by 0. So your Python parser is throwing an error called as zero division error, division by 0. So this division by 0 is called zero division error, is being termed as your exception over here. Okay, so now what we are going to learn in today's class. So I think you people understood what is an error, what is an exception. So something which is syntactically incorrect is termed as an error, will end up with an error, and something which is syntactically correct but still we end up with an error, then that's called as an exception. So what we're going to discuss in detail this class is about exceptions. Okay, so if you take exceptions, there are two kinds of exceptions termed as built-in exceptions and self-defined exceptions. Okay, so first we will concentrate on built-in functions, built-in exceptions with respect to Python. So built-in exceptions, how we discussed functions. Functions had two kind. We learned functions. There were two kinds of functions: built-in functions and user-defined functions. Okay, so built-in functions and user-defined functions. So built-in functions are the implementation of task, okay, which has been universally used by all the users. If I feel, if I am the person who's developing a programming language, and if I feel that if a user writing a code will always use these functions, he has to get input from the keyboard, he has to display output on the screen. So scan print and input, okay, are the two functions which does this work. So print and input are built-in functions. Okay, if I am the developer of Python, I would have developed print and input already. Okay, because everyone who's going to write a Python code will obviously use this print and input. So in the same way, how we learned about built-in functions and user-defined functions is, if I'm developing an application using this programming language, then obviously there will be a necessity for me to divide my entire application into small tasks. We can say it as small functions. Okay, so I will be writing my own self-defined function. So in the same way, exceptions can also be divided. So there are certain exceptions which are being already managed or already identified by Python, and it's been indicated to the user. Okay, so when I tried to work out, for example, when I tried to work out print of 0 divided by 0, okay, Python itself told me you are doing a division by 0. So it is not allowed. So this exception, okay, is already available with Python. So whenever I try a statement like that, Python itself will reply back, this is the error that you have done. Okay, clear. So in such a way, Python has a collection of built-in exceptions. Okay, a collection of built-in exceptions. Clear? So now self-defined exceptions will be what? The exceptions that you and me are trying to write, trying to create by ourselves. Okay, for example, what you can do is, I'll just give you an example. Consider elections are going to come. Okay, so who and all who are all eligible to vote in an election? Who are all eligible to vote in an election? A person, you have a constraint associated with it. If the person's age is above or equal to 18, and then only that person can vote in election. So if I'm developing an application for this voting process, then obviously I have to see that the age is being matching over there. So I can keep that as an exception. If the age is less than 18, then obviously that person is not allowed to vote. So the application will not work. Okay, what it will reply? It's an eligibility error. Okay, it has to throw eligibility error. Okay, so this, if I am developing my own application, okay, so I can fix my own exceptions for my application. So I gave you one example. I am developing an application for voting process, so there I have a biggest constraint. So whenever a person gets, his age has to be checked with his day, with the help of its day, voter ID, where you will be having the date of birth. Okay, so if the age is going to be lesser than 18, obviously he doesn't have the right to vote. So I can say, throw that as an exception. Okay, so age, assigning age will be a normal syntactically correct process, but when it is lesser than 18, it should not be accepted. Okay, so such stuffs which are very important to my application. You can ask me a question, ma'am, we can put this in an if else statement. It's not like that. Why I'm moving that into exceptions? Because that particular condition or constraint is very much important for my application. If that is going to be the case, okay, I can state that as an error. Okay, clear? I can state that as an error rather than checking that condition. If such a stuff happens, at once an error should reply. This person should not be taken into voting process. Okay, it is an error. Okay, so that is why we are not putting all these kind of stuffs into an if else gathering. The condition check panna less than 18 இருந்தா, I can just put a message. It's not like that. Okay, it's not like that, because that particular condition check is very much important for my applications. Then those stuffs can be moved as exceptions. Okay, so this is the meaning of exceptions over here. So now we will move on with the discussion of built-in hope I am clear, hope you're following. Yes, you understood the difference between error and exception. I want answers in chat. If you have understood, I'll proceed. Yeah, fine. So I'll move on with the discussion of built-in exceptions and self-defined exceptions. So I'm listing you a set of built-in exceptions that is associated with this language called as Python. So most of the languages, or I can say even all the languages, programming languages, will support these built-in exceptions. So the first built-in exception is zero division error. Okay, so zero division error, I already showed you that zero division error. When I try to divide a number by zero, then that will be termed as a zero division error. Okay, so second error is called as type error. So what is the, I'll just show you an example for this type error. Let me consider that I'm assigning a value a is equal to 10. Okay, now I'm taking another value called as b. Okay, and I want to sum up a plus, okay, I'm going to put b is equal to I'll take a itself. A is equal to uh, a plus, I'm putting 20. So now I clearly know, okay, a is actually an integer. If I take the type of a, it's an integer. But what is the type of 20? What is the type of 20? It is, in this case, it will be a string. So I'm trying to combine, okay, I'm trying to perform a concatenation process here for this integer with a string, which is not supported. So here, if you see this error, so the plus operator, okay, is not supported between int and string. So this type of error is called as type error. Okay, so the type of a is int and type of 20 is string, str. Okay, So addition is a process, okay, plus is a process which is not supported between int and str. So this is an exception. What exception has been thrown? Type error exception. So if I try this within my program, syntactically it is correct. Okay, syntactically there is no mistake. How do you represent a string? In the same way, 20 is enclosed within two double quotes. Okay, and then you have a plus operator. A is equal to a plus 20. Syntactically the assignment statement is perfectly correct. But what is the mistake? That is a type error. You're trying to add an integer with a string, which is not possible. Okay, so is it clear? So this is the second built-in function called as type error. So the third built-in function, if you see, it's called as name error. Name error is very simple. For example, average is equal to, for I'm putting, okay, இது டைரக்டாவே வந்துரும். Average அப்படின்ற வேரியபிளை இதுக்கு முன்னாடி நான் எங்கேயுமே வேல்யூ அசைன் பண்ணல, எங்கேயுமே நான் டிஃபைன் பண்ணல. ஸோ in this Python shell, okay, if I try to type average, and that actually means I'm trying to print average. Average is not already defined. Okay, then how can I try to type average over here? So what is being returned as an exception over here? It is name error. Okay, this is a name error. Okay, so now if you see over here, I'll put another case. Total is equal to 10. Okay, okay, so total is equal to 10, and now I'm saying average, not average, total. Okay, total is equal to, sorry, average is equal to total divided by p. So now again it will throw a name error. Why it is throwing a name error? I know what is total. Okay, I know what is total. I know, one sec. So I know what is total. The value of total is 10. Okay, but I don't know what is p. I have not assigned anything to p. So now I'm trying to divide total by p. So since I don't know what is p, it will throw a name error. P is not defined. Is it clear? So next, we have an error called as index error. Index error, I already explained what is meant by an index error. So index error is very simple. As I said, if I'm putting a is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and I'm putting a for loop for I in range of, I'm putting 0, 6. So how many elements are there? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Till 4 only you have an index. So I am trying to print a of I. Okay. So what happens over here? It will print, when it comes for the first time, it will print 1. Since Python is an interpreter, when initially what will be the value of I? It will be 0. So a of 0 is 1. Okay, it printed. Then a of 1 is 2. It printed correctly. A of 3 is 3. It printed correctly. A of 4 is, sorry, A of 3 is 4. It printed correctly. A of 4 is 5. It printed correctly. But still we have one more thing, that is A of 5. So when it came print A of 5, A of 5 is out of your index. Your index value is between 0 and 4. So your index value is between 0 and 4 only. But you are trying A of 5, which is not acceptable over here. So what error is being thrown? When you try to print A of 5, this throwed an error, or we can term it as exception over here. Index error, list index out of range. It will say list index out of range. That is, this error, this exception is commonly thrown when you try to solve any problems in any forums. That is, when we work out a complex program. Okay, you and me, okay, we will generally make this error called as index error. We will not fix the range correctly, and always we can see this error called as index, list index out of range. So when it states list index out of range, it will also tell you in which line also. So you have to go check that line. In this line, okay, it is saying list out of range. So I will check whether I have specified the range correctly or not. That check we have to do. So this is one exception I'm just pointing out, which people regularly perform. Okay, so if I'm writing a code and trying to execute it, or if you are trying to write a code and execute it for a complex problem statement, we always end up with this kind of exceptions, which has to be so only we are putting the knowledge to you. If you come across index error, you have to know this is how the things would have gone wrong. So this is the mistake that I would have done. Okay, so these are the purpose of built-in functions. Okay, these are universally happening errors. In the இதெல்லாம் ஏன் built-in functions are போட்டிருக்கணும்னா universal people who are writing codes can do these kind of mistakes. So these kind of mistakes or errors have to be notified. Okay, so whenever they look into that error, they can clearly identify, okay, this is where, or this is the stuff that I would have gone wrong. Okay, so that universally standard errors are being converted into built-in exceptions. Okay, so other than index error, we have something called as value error. So value error also, I gave you an example. For example, if you put value is equal to a, and if you try to print int of a, I'm sorry, int of value, it will return you a value error, invalid literal for int. So what is the error that is being stated over here? Invalid literal for int with a base 10. Okay, so invalid literal for int. Though a is a string, a is a character which has its corresponding ASCII value, that's not retrieved over here. Okay, it's with respect to base 10. This value a, okay, value I'm assigning a value which is a string. Okay, so I'm trying to convert a string into an integer, which is not possible. Why it is not possible? Inside the string you're not having a number. For example, if I put value equal to 12, okay, and now if I perform int of value, it will print 12 because 12 is a number. Okay, so these are the list of built-in exceptions that is available with respect to Python. Okay, so we will move on with the discussion of self-defined exceptions. So these are built-in exceptions which is thrown by your Python parser itself. Okay, so next we have to move into the exception called as self-defined exception. So self-defined exception can be raised by us. So how we will raise an exception, what actually raising an exception means. Okay, so you can raise your own exception. Okay, if this particular condition is reached in your program, okay, you can raise, you can force that exception to take place. இப்போ நம்ம print 0 divided by 0 போடும்போது பைத்தான் பார்சரே ஒரு எக்ஸப்ஷனை நம்மளுக்கு த்ரோ பண்ணி ப்ரோக்ராமை ஸ்டாப் பண்ணிடுது. ஓகே, அதுக்கப்புறம் ப்ரோக்ராம் will not get executed. அதே மாதிரி when I write my own application, I can raise my own exception. Okay, so that can be done with the help of a keyword called as raise. Okay, so that can be done with the help of a keyword called as raise. So let me take an example of I'll just write it over very simply. We all know that we maintain, since we all have our salary bank account. In most of the cases, a salary bank account can have nil balances. Okay, but when you go and try to open an account in different banks personally, if you want to do it personally, then obviously they will say this is the minimum balance that you have to maintain. Okay, so if your account balance is getting lower than the minimum balance, either the bank will not allow you to withdraw the money, or they can charge you something. Okay, they can charge you something. So here if you see, I'm keeping my current account balance. Okay, after some process, if it's going to be 200. Okay, now if it is below 500, I have to throw an exception. So I'm checking a condition. If account underscore balance, okay, account okay, balance I'll keep that name itself, BAAC. Okay, is going to be less than or less than 200. So less than 500. If my account balance is going to be less than 500, what is the exception that should be thrown? Okay, I have to raise an exception stating something within double quotes. Okay, so account balance should be more than 500. Okay, so I've raised this exception. So if I execute this code, it'll throw me an error. So for example, if I write this as a code, if I write this as a code, how can I write? I'm writing this. I'm getting an input from user. Okay, so that is account underscore balance. I'm getting it as a keyboard value is equal to int input of enter the balance. I'm writing it as a enter the balance. Okay, so after this, what I'm going to check a condition. If I didn't close it, if my account underscore balance is less than 500, what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to raise an exception stating that account balance less than 500. So no withdrawal. Okay, I cannot withdraw. I'm just putting it as a statement over here. Else, okay, else I can just print proceed with. Here I'm printing, or you can proceed with proceed. Enter. Okay, enter amount. Something like this will come. Okay, so I have raised an exception over here. So now if I try to execute this program, I hope this program is clear. I'm getting an input from the user, which is the account balance. He's putting an amount value. Okay, so if the account balance is going to be less than 500, so I will raise an exception and I will stop the process. And then if my account balance is going to be greater than 500, then I can say proceed, enter the amount that you want. Okay, so now I will execute this code. I'll save it first. Python, I'll save it. Okay, I'm putting it as exp112.py. Okay, so now if I execute this code, executing this code, it's asking me to enter a balance. So if I put 1000, what it will say? It's asking me proceed, enter amount. Okay, so if I execute it again, execute again, and I've put a value 200. What it did? It throwed me an exception. Raise exception. Account balance less than 500. So no withdrawal. Okay. Clear? It is not replying me. It is not replying anything positively. இப்போ நான் if கூட வெறும் print statement கொடுத்திருந்தேன்னா அது ஒரு positive reply தான் இருந்திருக்கும். It will not stop my process. Okay, it would have not stopped my process. Stopping the process actually means what? Stopping the execution of the program. இப்போ நம்மளுக்கு என்ன ஆயிடுச்சு? Program உடைய execution stop ஆயிடுச்சு இந்த கேஸ்ல. Okay, still if there are going to be any statements, those statements will not get executed. But in the other case, the other statements can get executed. So we'll just check it out whether it's happening or not. So else விட்டு வெளியே வந்த பிறகு I am putting a statement print all fine. Okay, so now I'm going to run this code. So it's asking me to write a balance. So if it's 1000, it will print proceed, enter the amount, all fine. Okay, so now I'll execute it again. So now I'm putting the balance as 200. Now what happened? It's directly throwing me an error. Okay, so after that, whatever has been present, it's not been executed. When I look into my code is syntactically perfect. Okay, so nothing is wrong in my code, but still an exception was thrown. An error took place. What was that error? Error actually means after that nothing will get proceeded. Okay, things will stop over there. So what was that error? It was not an error, it is an exception, because I have mentioned that I have raised that exception by myself. Okay, so this is how you can add exceptions into your you can define your exceptions by yourself. Okay, and you can stop the process of execution of your program. You can stop the execution of your program. Okay, clear? By throwing an exception. So this clearly states something is wrong. Okay, so I have to change it. Is it clear? Fine. So this is how we can raise exception. So after the exceptions are being raised, okay, so next thing that we have to know is how to handle our exceptions. Handling actually means in the error நடந்துடுச்சு. Okay, so இந்த error rectify பண்றதுக்கு what I can do is called as handling. Okay, so handling is what we are going to discuss next. How we are going to handle exceptions and okay, in all languages there are features, or we can say it as structures, which will support exception handling. Okay, so exception handling என்றது என்னதுன்னா, if this error happens, what should I do next? Okay, if this error happens, what should I do next is called as exception handling. That is how I am going to handle this exception. Okay, so for that purpose, in Python we are going to learn about a set of features, so that we generally term as Python try hyphen except. Okay, so what is, we will discuss one by one. Here try is actually a block, except is actually a block. So these blocks are going to help us to handle exceptions. Okay, இப்போ வந்த எக்ஸெப்ஷனை த்ரோ பண்ணிட்டோம். ஓகே, த்ரோ பண்ணி நம்ம ப்ராசஸை பாதியிலே ஸ்டாப் பண்ணிட்டோம். என்ன பண்ணோம்? எக்ஸிகியூஷன் ஆஃப் தி ப்ரோக்ராம் ஸ்டாப்ட் in between. So now if an exception happens, how I'm going to handle it is what we have to see next. Okay, so if an exception has been thrown, it has to be handled. So handle பண்றதுக்கான control structure தான் நம்ம இப்போ படிக்க போறோம். So first is whenever I write a code, I will run that particular code. Okay, so whatever code that I'm going to run, or I can say it in another way, whatever code in which I feel there is a possibility of exceptions to take place. Okay, I'm repeating it again. This is a part of my code where there is a possibility of an exception to take place. If I feels in that case, இப்போ I'll give you a simple example for that. I am writing a function. Okay, definition, calculate. I'm just writing. I am passing a list. Okay, so for this definition, a list is coming in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, for I in, I'm having a code like this. For I in range of, I'm putting something like this, 0 comma 8. Okay, something like this. Syntactically this code is right. Print I, print not I, L1 of I. So now what is the problem is over here is, if I look into this code, I know there won't be any error in this code. But for example, if the size of your L1 is going to be lesser than this 8. If size of L is going to be lesser, if it's going to be greater than 8, then that's not a problem. Okay, if size of L1 is going to be lesser than 8, okay, there is a possibility to end up with an what error? I am passing a list. If this list size is going to be lesser than 8, okay, what error will be thrown? Index error will be thrown. That is an exception. Okay, so I know there is a possibility for this code. I won't say it is always it will happen அப்படின்னு நான் சொல்ல மாட்டேன். ஏன்னா நான் ஒரு வாட்டி பாஸ் பண்ணும்போது len of L1 என்ன வரும்னா, len of L1 நான் கண்டுபிடிக்கிறேன்னு வச்சுக்கோ, சும்மா சொல்றேன். It will be 9. If len of L1 is 9, then obviously 0 to 8 is the index. So this program will work fine. Okay, this is one case. For example, if len of L1 is going to be 3, then obviously 0, 1, 2 alone is acceptable for I. Then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is not at all acceptable. Then obviously when I have a list with 3 values in it, then obviously this will end up with an index error. Okay, is it clear? So what is that we are going to understand first over here is whatever code that you feel that there is a possibility for error to happen, okay, that is an exception to happen, then put them inside your try block. Okay, so they are simply stating whatever code that you want to run, put them within the try block. எந்த இப்போ நான் ஒரு ஃபங்க்ஷன் டெஃபினேஷன் எழுதுறேன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க, அந்த ஃபங்க்ஷன் டெஃபினேஷனுக்குள்ள இருக்கிற எல்லா ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்டையும் நான் ரன் பண்ணுவேன். Okay, I will be executing all these statements within my function. So what I can do is I can put all those code within a try block. Okay, so any of the statement which is present inside that function can, in some situations, can throw exceptions. Okay, so எந்த ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்ல எக்ஸெப்ஷன் நடக்க வாய்ப்பு இருக்கோ அந்த ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் ட்ரை பிளாக் குள்ள போடணும். Okay, so next block is called as except block. What is the purpose of except block is this except block will get executed when there is an exception. So except block is the block which is going to handle the exception. Okay, so when a statement like index of error has taken place, okay, so that index of error will be thrown to this except block. அதாவது என் ட்ரை பிளாக்குள்ள ஒரு இண்டெக்ஸ் எரர் நடந்துடுச்சு, அப்போ இண்டெக்ஸ் எரருக்கு ரிலேட்டட் எக்ஸெப்ட் பிளாக் இருக்கணும். அந்த எக்ஸெப்ட் பிளாக்குள்ள you will be having a group of statements which will actually handle that exception. If such an exception happens, what I have to do next will be present within this except block. Okay, so similarly, whatever statements that I'm putting into this try block, it's not necessary that you're going to concentrate only on one type of exception. Okay, so a try block can contain n number of statements, and those n number of statements can throw n number of exceptions. It can throw a divide by zero exception, it can throw an index error, it can throw a value error, depends. Okay, it depends. So you can have, for one try block, you can have more than one except block. Is it clear? For one try block, you can have more than one except block. And finally, you can have an else block. What is this else block is, if no exception happens, try kapra enna run agano, else run agano. Okay, so try kapra enna run agano, else, and this else block is optional. So it depends upon your application. If you want an else block, you can keep it. Otherwise, there is no need of this else block. So no exception, this code will run. Okay, clear? Am I clear? Whatever code that you want to run, you have to put it into your try block. Okay, so if a specific exception takes place, that exception needs to be handled. So how do you handle it? Handling code will be present inside your except block. Okay, and I'm putting another point. One try block can have more than one except block. Why more than one except block? ஒரு பிளாக் ஆஃப் கோடுக்குள்ள ஒரு எக்ஸெப்ஷன் தான் த்ரூ ஆகணும்னு இல்லை, மோர் தென் ஒன் எக்ஸெப்ஷன் கேன் take place. It depends. Okay, and your try except blocks can also be associated with the else block. Okay, and this else block will get invoked only if there are no exceptions. ஏதாவது ஒரு எக்ஸெப்ஷன் நடந்தாலும் இந்த else block will not get executed. Okay, you have to understand the relationship. This else block will run only if there is no exception. And at last, we have another block, okay, which is also optional. Try இருந்துச்சுன்னா கண்டிப்பா except இருக்கணும். Okay, so இதுவுமே optional. அந்த optional block ஓட பேர் வந்து, it's called as finally. Okay, so what is the purpose of this finally na? If an exception happens also, if the exception is taking place or if the exception is not taking place, the code that you feel that has to get executed. Okay, whether exception takes place or not, this particular code should obviously get executed. Appadina, that code should be put into your finally block. Am I clear? நான் ஒரு ப்ரோக்ராம் எழுதுறேன். ஓகே, அந்த ப்ரோக்ராம்ல ஒரு 10 லைன்ஸ் இருக்கு. அந்த 10 லைன்ஸ்ல எக்ஸெப்ஷன்ஸ் த்ரோ ஆக வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு அப்படின்னு நான் ஃபீல் பண்ணா, I have to put them within the try block. Okay, so if such an exception takes place, I need to handle it. So to handle it, I will have this except block. ஓகே, அந்த கோடு கண்டிப்பா எக்ஸெப்ஷன் த்ரோ ஆகணும்னு அவசியம் இல்லை. ஸோ அப்படி எக்ஸெப்ஷன் த்ரோ ஆகலைன்னா நான் எல்ஸ் பிளாக்னு ஒன்று இன்ட்ரடியூஸ் பண்ணி அதை எக்ஸிக்யூட் பண்ண வச்சுப்பேன். ஓகே, அண்ட் தி ஃபோர்த் ஒன் இஸ் தி ஃபைனலி பிளாக். இஃப் எக்ஸெப்ஷன் இஸ் ஹேப்பனிங் ஆர் நாட், I want this 4 lines to get executed for all execution of my program. Abdina, I have to put that code into finally block. Is it clear? I hope this is clear. I will try to explain you with an example. Okay, so this example is very simple. What we are doing in this example is we are passing. Okay, we have created a function. I will just rewrite, or I'll show it over here. Okay, I'll just rewrite it. So you are having a function called as calculate. I'll put calculate. Okay, I'm just passing a list for this calculate. Okay, so what I'm coming inside and going to do is I'm going to just sum up the total. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sum up the total. So total initially it will be equal to 0. Okay, then what I do over here is I'm going to find out the total of all the elements inside it. So for I in 1 sec, just follow. Okay, so for I in, I'm taking each and every element in my list. For I in list 1, so I'm going to add the element. So total is equal to total plus the element in the list. So list, sorry, it's I. Okay, it's directly I. So after finding it, I am just printing it. So print, I gave it as list. Okay, list 1. I can print total. Okay, so after printing total, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an input from the keyboard. Okay, input is equal to int of input of enter the divide the denominator. I'm going to divide total by a denominator. Okay, enter the divisor. I'm just putting. I'm getting an input. So now after putting this, what I'm trying to do is I'll try to find out a value called as average, which is equal to total divided by this INP. Okay, so average is equal to total divided by this IMP. So let me consider this is the code. Okay, print. I'm going to try average. Average, comma, averages, comma, average. Okay, so now I feel that in this particular code that I have written, there is a possibility of 2 errors to take place. Okay, so what is the possibility of 2 errors? I can take there are possibility of many errors to happen. I'm just considering 2 errors. One is a division by 0. For example, the user is giving this input value to be 0. What happens over here? Your total will be divided by 0. So obviously this exception called as divide by 0 can happen over here. Okay, this is one point. Another point is what I can do is I'm giving the input to be a string value. Okay, but I'm trying to convert that into an integer. Okay, so what happens? A value error can happen over here. Okay, so 2 errors, 2 exceptions are possible over here because the INP value is got from the user through the keyboard. So keyboardல user தப்பா கொடுக்கிறதுக்கான வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. நான் இது எதையுமே டிஃபைன் பண்ணல. ஓகே, இந்த எக்ஸெப்ஷன்ஸ் வந்து நான் எழுதின கோடால நடக்க போறது இல்ல, யூசர் கொடுக்க போற இன்புட்டால நடக்கிறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. ஸோ ஒரு எக்ஸிகியூஷன்ல ஒன் யூசர் கேன் கிவ் அ கரெக்ட் வேல்யூ அண்ட் அதர் யூசர் கேன் கிவ் அ different value, which will end up with an exception. So as a code developer, I should think of these kind of exceptions which can be created by the user, not me. It is not under my control. Okay, இந்த மாதிரி எரர் வந்து ஏன் கண்ட்ரோல்ல இல்ல, கோட் எழுதுற ஏன் கண்ட்ரோல்ல இல்ல, because I am the person who is writing the code who can end up with syntax errors. Okay, syntax errors இருந்துச்சுன்னா அது என்னோட தப்பு. பட் syntax error இல்லாம இந்த மாதிரி errors வர வாய்ப்பு வந்து can happen through the user who is using this program. Okay, so if that is going to be the case, I will go with this process of exception handling. So what I will do over here is I will put this entire code within a block called as try. Okay, so what I will do over here is I'll just put one tab. So try is my block. I know that there is a possibility of error to happen over here. So I am moving this entire stuff into a try block. Okay, is it clear? So a try block should be followed at once by an except block. So except, so what is the exception that I'm expecting over here? There is a possibility of division by zero division error. Okay, that is the name of the exception, zero division error. Okay, so this exception can be thrown. If this exception is thrown, I'm just telling the program to print something. Divide by, rather than the program to stop. Okay, divide by zero error. Okay, this is one. Another error is what? Value error. So except I'm expecting expect value error. Okay, so if a value error happens, I'm going to print, okay, what I will print over here, invalid literal. Invalid literal for int. Okay, clear? If both the exceptions are not taking place, I will print, okay, let me take, else what I will do is I will print this average value over here. So control X, I'll take this off and I'll put it inside else. Average value can be printed. Okay, if nothing goes wrong. Okay, suppose if you want a statement which has to get executed if exception takes place, or if exception is not going to take place, you want a statement to get executed. If that's going to be the case, I can put print not sir purila, I couldn't get you.
Double the
Yeah,
invalid முன்னாடி இது பண்ணுங்க.
oh, okay sir, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to put no issues. Okay, no issues. I'm just putting a statement, no issues. Clear? No issues, you can handle it. Just I'm putting a statement over here. So what I've done, since I feel that there is a possibility of an exception to happen within these statements, I'm putting them within try block. Okay, so I think about two exceptions can happen over here. இதெல்லாம் நான் கெஸ் பண்றது, கோடரா நான் கெஸ் பண்றது. இந்த இன்புட் வேல்யூவை ராங்கா கீபோர்ட்ல கொடுத்துட்டாங்கன்னா, இதை ஜீரோன்னு கொடுத்துட்டாங்கன்னா ஜீரோ டிவிஷன் எரர் வர வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. ஸோ I'm creating an exception for, அதாவது handling except function என்ன பண்ணும், it will handle the exception. I'm creating this except block to handle the zero division error. So first except block is for zero division error. So if such an error happens, I'm just printing divide by zero error. Okay, so next I feel about another exception. If this input value inp value which has been given from the user is going to be a string, then obviously it's not possible for me to convert that into an integer. So if that's going to be the case, then I will throw a value error. Okay, so value error throw பண்றதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. So if a value error has been thrown by the Python parser, as a developer I want to handle it. I will handle it with my except block for a value error. So I'm going to print this. If both these exceptions are not going to take place, I will calculate average. Okay, I will calculate average. Otherwise, I will print average. What I'm going to do, I'm going to print average. Okay, if anything can take place in the code execute ஆகி exception throw பண்ணாலும் சரி, இல்ல exception throw ஆனாலும் சரி, ஆகாட்டியும் சரி, I want the code, I want some code to be printed always. So this is that kind of code will fit into finally. So if I execute this code, if I give run, I'm sorry, I didn't give values, I didn't invoke this function. So we will invoke this function. How I will invoke, I'm putting 1 second, what is the name of this function, calculate, 1 sec. I'll put calculate, I have to invoke it. So I'll put calculate I'll create a list over here. Okay, so I'm going to create a list over here. L1 is equal to, I'm just giving some numbers, 100 comma 200 comma 300. Okay, and I'm calling this function calculate of L1. Okay, I have invoked this function. So now if I execute it, so it is asking me for a divisor. Okay, clear. So total I have printed it as 600. So if I give a divisor as 0, divide by 0 error, no issues, you can handle it. So it's a divide by 0. That message has been displayed over here. So what has happened over here? An exception was being raised. Okay, that exception was being handled also. So வெறும் exception மட்டும் ரைஸ் ஆயிருந்தா என்ன ஆயிருக்கும்? இந்த மாதிரி ரெட் கலர்ல எரரா அது நோட்டிஃபை ஆயிருக்கும். ஓகே, பட் நம்ம இங்க என்ன பண்ணிட்டோம்? அந்த எக்ஸெப்ஷனை ஹேண்டில் பண்ணிட்டோம். And we are conveying that to the user in a better way and saying divide by 0 error has happened. So no issues. You try to handle it. Okay. So now if I execute it for another time. ஓகே, நோ இஷ்யூஸ் ஹேண்டில் இட்ன்றது எதுக்குள்ள இருந்துச்சு? ஃபைனலிக்குள்ள இருந்துச்சு. நம்மளுக்கு ஒரு எக்ஸெப்ஷன் த்ரோ ஆச்சு. அந்த எக்ஸெப்ஷன் த்ரோ ஆன உடனே அந்த எக்ஸெப்ஷனுக்குள்ள இப்ப இங்க என்னாச்சு? பிரிண்ட், இந்த ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் பிரிண்ட் ஆச்சு. மீதி எல்லாத்தையும் ஸ்கிப் பண்ணிட்டு ஃபைனலிக்குள்ள என்ன ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் இருந்துச்சோ அந்த ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் பிரிண்ட் ஆயிடுச்சு. ஓகே, ஸோ நவ் இஃப் ஐ ரன் இட் and if a user makes this error, what is the error that the user is going to make? He's going to give a value a as input. Now what happened? A will not divide. Okay, a is not an integer actually. So invalid literal for int. The second exception has been second exception, value error is being thrown and it is being handled. Handle பண்ற block குள்ள என்ன print பண்ண சொல்லிருக்கோம்? Invalid literal for int. And கடைசியா finally குள்ள இருக்கிற அந்த statement execute ஆகி no issues, you can handle it அப்படின்னு சொல்லிடுச்சு. Okay, so now if I execute for the next time, so if I run this module again and if I give a correct value, for example 12, so what happened over here? 12 நான் சொன்னதுனால ரெண்டு எக்ஸெப்ஷனும் ரன் ஆகல. அந்த ரெண்டு எக்ஸெப்ஷனும் நடக்காததுனால எல்ஸ் பார்ட்ல இருக்கிற இந்த print statement, print averages, அது எக்ஸிக்யூட் ஆயிடுச்சு. as well as finally will get executed under any case. So the statement inside finally also got executed. Average is 50, no issues, you can handle it. That message will also get executed. Is it clear? So this is called as exception handling. So no error is being thrown by your system. The exception is handled neatly by your code itself. So this is called as throwing exception and handling it. Okay, is it clear? If you have any doubts, you can ask me. With this, we finish up today's class. If you have doubts, you can ask me. Thank you. I'll show you, I'll just ask you some questions. I'll have some questions here. In VTQ, I have some questions. One sec. So tomorrow, exceptions, I'll show you some questions. If you give me answers, I will, whatever answer you give, I will press it. This one, yeah. Tell me the answer for this. Go through the below code, okay, and predict the output. I think you can predict the output and tell me. Number 1 is equal to 100, number 2 is equal to 0. So try.
Option 3, ma'am.
Option 3. So you're saying I will submit. 0 division error occurred. Your answer is correct. Okay. Similarly, I have another question. Give me the answer for this. Code. What will be the output of the given below code? Value error and final.
Type error.
Value error and finally is one answer. Value error finally. So for this option, okay, reach 7 and it'll go this. What was been given over here? What we gave? Okay. What we gave? We gave it as value error. Okay. And it printed value error and whatever within finally was printed. I'll try this. Fine. Inside finally what we had? Finally only, no? Our answer was one sec. No, no. This was what error actually? Int of A. Int of A implies it's a type error. Okay. I got confused.
Ma'am, finally we are printing done,
Done.
right?
Done will get printed. I have a doubt. Value error finally and done. I'll check this out. One sec.
Type error finally and done, that means.
According to me, done should not come. Is it getting executed? It is getting submitted. I have a doubt. Now, one sec. Yeah. Yeah. Value error finally and done. Okay. So with this, we finish up today's session. If you have any doubts,
மேடம்
yeah. Yeah, yes, sir.
ஃபைனலிக்கு அப்புறம் வந்து எதுவும் பிரிண்ட் ஆகிருக்கூடாதுல்ல மேம்? அது வந்து என்ன பிரிண்ட் ஆயிருக்கோ அதோட முடிஞ்சுக்கணும்ல மேம்? அதுக்கப்புறம் பிரிண்ட் கொடுத்தாலும் பிரிண்ட் ஆகுமா அது?
Since this is Python, okay, so in Python, finally block-க்குள்ள தவிர்த்து அதுக்கப்புறம் which is out of the இதுக்குள்ள இருக்கு ஃபங்க்ஷனுக்குள்ள இருக்கு பட் தட் கோட் இஸ் நாட் அ பார்ட் ஆஃப் ஃபைனலி ஆர் எல்ஸ் ஆர் எக்ஸெப்ட் ஆர் anything ட்ரை பிளாக்குள்ள இல்லாததுனால that block is also getting executed. But I do have a doubt over this, so let me clarify this tomorrow. I'll check it out and clarify this tomorrow.
ஓகே, தேங்க்யூ.
Thank you. Any other doubts? And one more thing, 25th you will not be having your class since it's Christmas. Okay, so after tomorrow, 20, 25, 26, 27, we don't have class. So we will be resuming back on 27th. That's on Monday. But tomorrow you have class. Tomorrow, that is 24th, we have class. But 25, 26, 27, we don't have class. 25th is Christmas, so we don't have class on that. You can move on with your laboratory session.